how to spot massive new technology waves, what one of the top venture capitalists in the world thinks about the future, and why surfing with Brian Ascher is so legendary. All right, all right, all right. Hey ho, let's go. Hello, my legendary friends. This is Christopher Lochhead, your host here on Legends and Losers. Thank you so much for investing part of your life with us today. And man, am I ever stoked you're here. We have a great guest. And this episode really sits at the heart of our mission to hack some of the best minds of Silicon Valley and to really dig into what it takes to design a legendary business and a legendary life. And if you're new to the show, that's really what the show's about. We're trying to have an authentic dialogue about what it really takes, not this sort of the BS that we often get fed. And if you're a regular listener, thank you from the bottom of my heart. All right. So our guest today, Brian Ascher, is a buddy of mine, and he's one of the top venture capitalists in the world, according to Forbes. And we have an incredible dialogue about a whole bunch of different things. But let me tell you something that's been on my mind for the last couple of days before I flesh out Brian. I had a conversation with my friend and mentor, Bix Bixon, and his son and partner, Joe Bixon, recently. And they've been giving me some coaching. And Bix kind of whacked me in the nuts about Legends and Losers. And here's what he said. He said that when I fawn over our guests, that what I do is sort of, and these are me putting words in Bix's mouth, so you'll have to excuse me, Bix, but that I kind of put them up on a pedestal, and it creates separation between us normal humans, if you will, and those people. And so from the very beginning of Legends and Losers, that's the opposite of what we've wanted to create here. The reason the show is called Legends and Losers, of course, is because you can't be a legend without being a loser. And these conversations, these interviews, this media that we hear with incredible people often at least leaves me feeling like, oh, well, there's basketball great Steph Curry. He has talent. He has a thing in his, right next to his kidneys that I don't have. And so I can't be like him. And so fuck it, I'll just drink some beer or whatever. And it can actually be disempowering. And so Bix was kind of whacking me a little bit by saying that when I fawn over our guests and I get overly excited about them, that I can create this feeling like they're on this pedestal. So I want you to know, I fawn over our guests only because I kind of fall in love with them. And some of them were my heroes before they came on the show, and many of them become my heroes or my hero as they're on the show. And so I just get excited. That's the 12-year-old boy in me, excited to have a conversation with somebody that I'm really getting it into. So to quote Archie Bunker, please don't misconstrue my enthusiasm for some of our guests, and make no mistake, our mission here on Legends and Losers is to try to hack into what does it really take, and look at the losing and look at or as we like to say, the losery along the way. And most importantly, provide a platform for all of us to get into a real conversation, because there's no difference between, by way of example, three-time Super Bowl champion Brett Jones and what Brent did to get there, and then ultimately become a successful VC and retire from that. If you hear Brent's background, you're gonna think, oh my God, he's amazing. I suck. End of discussion. But if you've listened to our dialogue, what you get, I hope, is what you get from the vast majority of these Legends and Losers dialogues, which is somebody amazing like Brent coming on, willing to get very real about what it took for them to achieve what they've achieved in their lives. Now, speaking about getting real, that's why I wanted to have Brian Ascher on. I've gotten to know Brian over the last year or so. I've known him longer than that, and known him by reputation for much longer than that, but really only gotten to know him in the last year or so. He and I, he's a partner at Venrock Capital here in Silicon Valley. And I got to know him through his partner, Brian Roberts, who's also been on the show, who I've also done some deals with in the past. And it's just been great getting to know him. and he's one of the smartest minds in Silicon Valley. And what we found out is we both share a passion for surfing. And so what we decided to do is the Venrock folks have this podcast you probably know of. If you don't, I recommend you check it out, called Running Through Walls. And so the idea that we came up with would be, wouldn't it be fun if we spent some time together, went for a surf, and then shot an episode of Running Through Walls and then an episode of Legends and Losers. So that's exactly what we did. We did Running Through Walls first, where I was the guest and Brian kind of was putting me in the hot seat. And then we flipped it and did a Legends and Losers. And I think we get into some really, really great stuff about surfing and about what it takes to build a legendary business and his career. And it's just a fascinating conversation. All right. So Brian Ascher is a partner at Venrock Capital. He's been there since '98. He's a Kauffman Fellow, which if you Google that, you'll find out that's a very big ding-dong accomplishment. He invests in both consumer and enterprise technology companies. As I mentioned, we've been working together on this wonderful new startup called Socrates, founded by our friend Randy Womack. Brian's a Stanford MBA. And because of his successes with companies like Vocera, Data Allegro, Audify, Red Beacon, SlideShare, Relay Health, he is a regular member, I guess, if you will, of the Forbes Midas list of the top venture capitalists in the world. And now here he is, my friend Brian Ascher, on Legends and Losers. So where's your favorite place to surf?
Anywhere on the planet? Indonesia. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just something about here's something interesting. If you go due south from Indonesia, you don't hit land until you hit ice.
Mm.
I mean, it is a vast, vast stretch of ocean. And of course, you go that far. And if you avoid Bali, you've generally avoided crowds. And,
yeah,
it's warm, it's beautiful. The food is great. The water's clear, and a little bit of trash in the water, but that is an issue, but it's magical. I've been back 3 times, and that's my special place.
I agree. Best surfing in my life has been in Indonesia for sure. Yeah, it's a trek to get there.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the fun. And if you're going to go that far, you might as well get it good and get it relatively alone. And there's a lot of places you can travel and still be with crowds and not necessarily get waves.
And did you do a boat trip, or did you stay on an island, or how did you do it?
That was an island trip. I've never done a boat trip. I have one coming up, but I think, there's quite a bit of downtime, and I like to be able to stretch my legs and try other things.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to a boat trip. I would recommend it.
Yeah.
At least try it.
Yeah.
And I've been on, a handful, and they're fun. And here's what I know about those things. The crew matters.
Yeah.
Like your friends, your family, whoever you're with, and then the crew of the boat matters.
Right. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, one asshole fucks the whole thing up.
Right. And generally you want it to be all your crew. Like if you're going to travel that far, work hard, get a few extra friends, make sure it's your crew.
I think that's even true if you're going to stay on a small island.
Yeah.
If
absolutely.
you can pull it off.
Absolutely.
Right. Because,
absolutely.
Yeah. So when you go to Indo, you try to get a group of guys together.
Yeah. So far, they only have so many, accommodations and so many slots. So you can generally, if you plan far enough in advance, get 8 people to take the bait.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also a camaraderie that happens on those trips, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, it's a great way to bond. I mean, surfing in business is a thing now, right? Like, I don't know, people still play golf, but like today's generation of entrepreneurs, like they surf and mountain bike and skateboard, and it is a great bonding experience.
So do you surf with entrepreneurs too?
Yeah, usually. Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, if you're going to go with friends from around here, chances are they're involved in tech somehow, some way.
Well, I had a great time surfing with you today.
Yeah, that was fun.
I hope we do a lot more of it.
I hope so too. I know we're sitting here hearing some waves in the background thinking we may have jumped the gun and gotten in too early, but
I think the swell's building.
Yeah, that's always that way. You should have been here yesterday or tomorrow.
Oh, yesterday, man, the waves were awesome. The beer was cold. There was tons of women in bikinis. It was fantastic. Sorry you couldn't be here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of these things where you want to make sure that you could stay in the present moment, right? You can't worry what you missed yesterday, what you missed, later when you can't be in the water, and just enjoy. I think we did that today.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we got to do a paddle too.
Right.
Get some exercise.
A little bit.
A little bit. And the other thing too is it's not possible to be anywhere other than the present when you're on a wave.
I agree. I think that feeling magnifies a lot when it's big though, right? When it's big and you're fighting for your life and you're like, oh man, like every moment is focus. Small days floating around, your mind can wander a lot. But it's almost like two different sports, really. It's sort of like walking versus climbing Everest.
Yeah.
And both are fun.
I still feel, even like on a day today that was pretty small, when you're on the wave.
Absolutely.
Everything else, absolutely. But for
that moment, there's nothing else in your mind.
8 seconds you're on
that. Totally. It's exactly right. Like I have a lot of trouble meditating, that monkey brain or whatever, like it just keeps getting me. Even for like an interval of 10 seconds, surfing, everything just goes away other than what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
It's moving meditation.
I find it the same way. I can't really meditate. I've tried over the years, and I'm now, as a 49-year-old man, I've just said, fuck it.
Oh, yeah. You'd be a disaster meditating. I can't imagine it.
So if I told you I was like this meditation guru, you wouldn't buy it.
Well, no, probably not.
I'm curious why.
I'd want independent verification. I just think you're too amped, too fidgety.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
And I get that experience. The only way I can access it is physically.
Now, you probably get it when you fight too, right? Because your mind can't wander there either.
No, big time. And it sounds crazy to equate martial arts and surfing, but very much so. Yeah. When you're even training, you're not thinking about anything else. You're working on the combination, you're working on the move, you're doing, whatever it is. And then, I tend to spar on a regular basis, and to be clear, we're not smashing the shit out of each other. The sparring that we do is what we call flow sparring. And so, there's a possibility to get injured, but we're not trying to kill each other. We're trying to execute the training and simulate what it's like to have somebody trying to smash you, but not actually smash the shit out of each other.
That's good.
Yeah. I'm not training. I'm not training to compete. I'm not Dana White from the UFC is not going to call me anytime soon.
Yeah. It's not time to get your third concussion.
That's kind of what I think, and after my second concussion, my martial arts sensei said to me, you make your living with your brain, right? No, I guess theoretically I don't really make a living anymore, so maybe I could get some more concussions.
All right, make your choices, live with the consequences.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any sense at this age, but being in critical environments is a very focusing thing.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And even a training situation that's simulated, your mind doesn't really know it's simulated, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Your mind behaves, even though I very rarely spar with people I don't know. And most of the time I spar with people I know really well. And I think that's important. We can talk about why if you like. But even though you're with a buddy, your monkey brain still fires for sure. Because they're throwing punches and kicks and shit at you, right?
Yeah. I think your brain says, put up your dukes, man. Defend.
Exactly. Defend.
Totally.
But it's interesting, that some of us have to access that namaste place physically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really important, especially when, you're overwhelmed with work and, electronics coming at you and screens and everything. And it's nice to have some place you go to focus and, recharge the spirit.
So do you think surfing makes you better at work?
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes me a happier person, more balanced. And, if you bring that into the workplace, only good things happen. You can't overdo it, right? Like, careers in tech and venture capital require most of your time, if not virtually all your time, that you don't allocate to family and fitness and whatever. But, even if you steal away a little bit, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And are you guys, are you 60-hour work, 80-hour work kinds of?
I feel like the notion of like how many hours a week you work is almost impossible to calculate anymore, because you're always working partially. You're checking your phone, you're on email at crazy odd hours, 7 days a week. Even if you're on vacation, you're cracking open the laptop and clearing the inbox for a couple hours, while the kids or family sleep. So like, how do you add that up? Like, I don't even bother. It was different when you went to the office, your computer was stuck to your desk, and then you went home at some certain time. So I don't know. But, the tools give you some degree of freedom to do your thing anywhere.
Yeah.
You could be there on the soccer field with your kid or whatever, some of the time, not all the time, but yeah, no, there's no such thing as life balance, right? It's more like life harmony. Sometimes it's going to go to one extreme or the other, and it'll never be, equal, perfect, but you sort of do them both well, and think you'll be happy and effective in both environments.
I think that's a much more powerful way to think about it, because I got into that exact place where I just go, actually, even the notion of work-life balance kind of pisses me off, because it's like, what are you talking about? We just have a life, right? We don't have our work life here and our other life there. We have a life.
Yeah. One interesting concept that an entrepreneur I respect greatly gave me, though, is you do need to think about your allocation of energy, that you don't have infinite resources to be focused and doing your best thinking work. And so his notion was, when you've hit that peak and you're fast becoming, mud brain, like it's time to do something else and maybe come back to it, or go to sleep and wake up early and back at it again. But really the quality of your thinking time is something I'm much more attuned to now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this may sound like a funny question, but are there certain times a day you find that you're better or worse for that?
Not really, because that's one of those things you can't control, when you have a morning meeting, or, need to get on an early flight, or when you have a work dinner. So, there's no pattern to my life.
Yeah.
I can't. I'd like to work out in the morning. It'd be fantastic if I had time to work out and meditate and clear the inbox and be ready for, quality thinking in meetings, whatever. But, you take every day as it comes.
Yeah. I mean, I find generally I'm better for big thinking, like creative thinking, for sure, in the morning.
Yeah. One interesting time management hack that I've learned from others is trying to keep a certain day of the week really clear for think time, and then trying to make your weekend not just about catching up all the shit you didn't get done during the week, but really leave that to some quality think time. Maybe when you read, maybe when you map something out, a thought that you've been having. But you have to really create these spaces, because otherwise your calendar just get filled with a lot of, meetings and empty calorie kind of work.
Well, in your business, everybody wants to pitch you something. And everybody wants feedback on their startup. Like you do a lot of free consulting in a sense, right?
Yeah, it's part of what we do.
And so, I mean, you've been doing it for a long time, but I got to believe, at least in the beginning, the first few years, it's hard to develop the radar for, should I or shouldn't I take this meeting with this entrepreneur?
True. And, I think it's still a challenge. Most of the times it's a meeting that won't wind up in an investment you make. I mean, just the numbers prove that. But
how many investments do you make a year, Ryan?
Oh, like individually, one or two, maybe a really busy year would be 3.
Right.
But I think you go into every meeting with a mindset that says, somehow, some way I'm going to add some value to this person, and somehow, some way I'm going to get something. It may not be immediate, but somewhere down the road, this connection or this encounter or this thought that'll be shared will benefit me. And so I think that mindset makes these meetings that don't really result in something directly beneficial, like an investment for either side, frankly, much more enjoyable, much more valuable.
Right. So how do you decide? Like In my new life, so to speak, I'm learning a new lens or a new set of lenses to decide. Because what's happened for me is if I say yes, I'm not retired anymore.
Right. Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm really committed to being at least semi-retired. And so there's oh, we'd love to pick your brain kind of people. And then there's oh, we'd like to give you money to do, or stock, or both. Send both. Send lots of both. Money and stock, for you to help us or come on our board or advise us or whatever. And so it's hard to develop a new lens around, like I've had to reset what criteria is for saying yes. Because a big part of me wants to say yes. But if I say yes, then I'm working again. But in your case, I mean, you guys I got to believe you get more inbound than you know what to do with.
Sure. I think virtually every firm is in that situation, and you're picking carefully and you're choosing along a variety of dimensions. It's very much focused on that founder, that entrepreneur, and, developed a notion of this duality that you're looking for. Someone who is really, really compelling about their vision and where they're going and how great it's going to be and why it matters to the world. But also you get this feeling that they're really pragmatic and realistic about all the challenges they face right now. And when they tell you something, you can trust them and you think they're going to be detail oriented and open-minded and all those things. That's a hard balance for someone to have both of those, to be both the dreamer and the doer. And that's ultimately what you're looking for. And if that's someone you feel you could work well with, it's not easy. There's not 5 of those walking in your door every day.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder about you is, so, for me, my criteria is, did you invest? Right? So when Ascher or Roberts call, by way of example, it's like, okay, well, so there's Brian Ascher in my inbox and he wants to introduce me to an entrepreneur. There's a high degree of likelihood that this is a very good use of my time. And so that's a very easy criteria. But you don't have a because often you're the seed or early stage, or
you're bringing up an interesting topic, which is, there's a lot of truth and a lot of discussion around how competitive it's become for seed rounds and, hot deals and valuations increasing, and all that is true. But there's a lot of opportunities that are just not obvious. It's an unproven entrepreneur who doesn't have pedigree from Stanford engineering and friends with all the cool kids, or it's in a market that's a little unusual, or there's something kind of wrong with a space. Like there's a little bit of hair on it. And these deals are not the ones that people are all fighting over. And what you hope is that you're able to think different and ultimately be proven right a couple of years out. So that's kind of what we shoot for, more than we can outcompete these 10 other firms all fawning over this entrepreneur and this deal that has somehow been anointed as hot. And sometimes, a hot deal hasn't even launched yet. It's just everyone's, convinced that that's the one they all want to be in. And that's generally not where you want to focus your energy, at least for us. That's not a strategy that we prefer.
Now, I've thought about this a lot over the 21 years or so I've been in and around Silicon Valley. And you tell me if this is unfair. You've seen those Nat Geo specials on the penguins.
Sure. Yeah.
And the penguins are all hanging out doing a lot of fucking nothing. And then all of a sudden the big Mac Daddy penguin jumps in
the water and they all follow.
And so venture capitalists are like that, right?
People often want to believe that. Right.
Well, it seems like, and not just venture capitalists, but the whole ecosystem, it seems like somebody stands up on Sand Hill Road and goes, all right, IoT, everybody into the water. And all of a sudden, the Internet of Things is where everybody is, right? And then it's whatever it is after
that. We started out this conversation talking about surfing. And I think this notion of waves and not wanting to be caught inside and miss a wave is very appropriate here. And sometimes early on, it's really tough to know is this a ginormous wave where there's going to be, like cloud or SaaS or even potentially IoT, although I think there's been fewer success stories there. It's still quite early. Like, okay, how many great companies is this going to create? Maybe it's one, maybe it's none, right? Like, I don't know. Let's talk about trends that came and went fast, like flash sales or daily deals. There was a bunch of folks who, this was a particular point in time. It was the economic crisis. So merchants were stuck with all this extra inventory, and small businesses were terrified that their restaurant or their salon was empty. And so, some enterprising entrepreneurs said, let's help them fill it up and sell this excess inventory at deep discounts or, big coupons off. Groupon style stuff, and it worked real well. And then
they were one of the fastest growing companies in history for a while, were they not?
Sure. And there were a million copycats within months.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the economy recovered and the consumers got fatigue, and in the flash sale space, merchants became more worried. Hey, now that I could sell my high-end brand at full price again, like, do I really want to tarnish my brand by having all this deeply discounted?
Are these Groupon customers really going to be good, loyal customers? Back, right? They're kind of price-sensitive, shitty customers.
All this stuff happens.
All that stuff.
So that was an example of a wave that everyone paddled like crazy to catch, and it turned out to be like a one-wave set.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe not even that. Maybe that ride, there was a closeout at the end.
Yeah, big time closeout, and a lot of people got smashed.
But when cloud first became a thing, we didn't call it cloud. First, we called it application service providers. This notion that you didn't have to install your software on a data center that you controlled and managed, and boot up servers and all that kind of stuff. Rather, pay someone who will run it for you on their infrastructure, and you just need a browser to access it. ASP, then SaaS, and now maybe cloud is more of the term. When that first got going, there was a lot of concern. Hey, won't the incumbents, won't PeopleSoft just move to the cloud? Siebel move to the cloud? Everyone who's already got customers and brand and code, just put it in some emulator and run it through a browser. What the innovators like Salesforce saw was that no, this is not something you take the old software and just stick it in this Citrix-like environment, but rather we got to rewrite it from scratch, and it's a whole new way of buying for the customer, selling. Like it's an entirely different value proposition. My point is that was an enormous wave. That was a wave that's going to spawn dozens and dozens and dozens of companies, and that thing's going to last 20 years. We're still barely through that transition to the cloud.
And what percentage of enterprise apps now are cloud? It's a relatively small number, isn't it?
Oh, of all the software that businesses use? Yes. Yeah. Of the pitches we see?
Yeah, well,
it's everything.
So if I showed up in your office today and I said, okay, so here's the thing, Brian, we're going to sell software to companies, and they're going to install that software on their servers, and they're going to pay maintenance because they're buying, not renting it. Do you throw me out of your office?
I want to hear why you think that.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's funny you bring that up, because I've met a few companies who have recognized that there are certain segments from whom a hybrid architecture, some cloud where it's loud and some on premise, but we're going to do it on premise in a way that's different than the old way of lots of custom engineering and integration points and like really hard to manage servers. We're going to be able to, I'd like to listen to that story. And if you have a compelling reason, then maybe that's a very differentiated point of view that is bucking the conventional wisdom. So who knows? I don't know.
Interesting.
But anyway, back to your point, like I think the reason the VCs and the ecosystem jumps on every wave is because early on in the wave, if it's a good idea, you don't know whether it's going to be an enormous 20-year, tectonic shift, or it's going to be, a quick and over fad. And sometimes you just need to sort through that. Dollar Shave Club was one example in our portfolio where I think it got caught.
Such a great company, though. Great new category innovation.
Yeah. And initially, though, people were looking at it and say, we've seen this movie. This was subscription commerce, and there have been a few efforts, and they were real hot until all the customers churned out. And the thing about a subscription business is no matter how fast you're growing, if your churn rate is high, eventually that leaky bucket drains because it's just
Did they
too
have
expensive.
bad churn?
No, that's the
I
thing.
thought they were super sticky.
They were fantastic, but at the time, these other companies that were hot started to blow up in a bad way, like fall apart. And people said, "What are you kidding? I don't want to meet anyone who's talking to me about subscription commerce."
But now every single fucking company, they want me to subscribe to underwear, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah.
Like, why do I need to subscribe to underwear, Brian?
Well, that's what we liked about Dollar Shave is like you buy razors, you buy.
It's a consumable.
It's a consumable.
Well, I guess sooner or later, even men have to buy new underwear, right?
They should. They should. I'm not quite sure what the time frame, the interval.
What is the interval? Is 10 years? How
are we talking about underwear or razors?
Underwear.
Fuck if I know.
I was told by my doctor. I don't know. You know this because you invested in the company, but that you should throw your razor out after every shave.
Well, I think at least once a week. Depends how hairy you are and if you're shaving every day. But that was one of the insights that Michael Dubin had, which is, okay, we're getting people to subscribe, but we got to convince them that, okay, now that we've sent you, 4 razors, use them. Like the luxury of paying $1 for a blade is throw that damn thing away after a couple of uses.
And I'll never forget, you talk about legendary marketing, the Dollar Shave Club ad where the guy goes into CVS to buy the fucking razors and gets tased. Do you remember that ad?
Of course. Absolutely.
And I will never forget the first time I went into an American drugstore and I tried to buy fucking razors.
Right.
And it was like breaking into Fort Knox and somebody had to call security.
Glass.
And what the fuck are you talking about? And the other thing too, I'm oblivious. When I understood what those fucking razors cost.
Right. No, it's crazy.
How do they get away with that shit?
Right. And that was the insight, that it doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
And if you build a lifestyle brand and you're not just marketing, hey, this is cheaper, but whatever. If you really appeal to men and you become, a habit, then they'll stick with you. And they did. And so.
And I think about category innovation all the time, of course. And subscription is, you could argue, a very small idea, but it's a very big idea, right?
When properly applied.
Properly applied. And so those guys took an ancient category and by the way, this is the difference between product innovation and category innovation. Everybody fucking read Christensen, right? Innovator's Dilemma. Well, you know what? Fuck Christensen. He was wrong. And the reason I say that, and I think Innovator's Dilemma is a great book, but the reason I say that is the conclusion everybody came to was we need more innovation. And what that equaled was we need more product innovation. And so the fucking idiots in the shaving space, what do? From 2 blades to 3 blades.
Right.
From 3 blades to 4 blades.
With lights and vibrators and heat. And
then they would put the strip and then it vibrates and sooner or later they're going to get one that tickles your nuts. And maybe we'll all buy that. But so they're having this, and the thing I always think about with that, you remember Something About Mary?
Yeah.
Do you remember the scene when they pick up the hitchhiker who's a psycho killer?
Let's say I do. All right.
Okay. So I can't remember exactly how the conversation goes with Ben Stiller, but the conversation is something like, "Hey, psycho killer, what's your life plan?" He's like, those guys 5-minute abs, 4-minute abs. I'll kill them with 4-minute abs, right? And then Ben Stiller says, "Oh, that's really interesting, psycho killer. What happens when someone comes out with 3-minute abs? You're fucked." And everybody goes, ha, 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 it's a funny scene in the movie. But that's what everybody fucking does in business, right? They do 3-minute abs, and they do 3-minute abs with a vibrating thing and all this stuff in the shave business, right? And what ends up being the innovation that matters, that creates real value, is a new category predicated on a new business model.
A lot of people want to be better. It's a little harder to be different.
Oh, hey, mate, could you say that again? Just say that nice and slow for me. Say that nice and slow.
It's true. It's true. It's so hard to truly be different and to think different and do it before the world agrees. And that's why it's rare.
Yeah, and I've had to relearn it, with Legends and Losers. I spent my whole life being different because I can't be any other way. I realized this recently. My go-in premise to anything is to reject the status quo. Like that, I start like you could say to me something I've never heard of before. Like when I first, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, heard about neuroplasty.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what neuroplasty was, but I wanted to reject the standard thinking about neuroplasty and get to the non-standard. Like my go-in position is like a punk rocker smash you in the face, right? And so I'm always looking for where is that
Mm-hmm.
Frodo, that
Mm-hmm.
from two that's like gonna blow this thing away. Or another way to say it is, why the fuck is it this way?
Right.
Even if this way seems like a smart, good way, like how did it land here as opposed to some other way?
Well, I think the whole tech realm is at the beginning of that transition, that things are about to change fundamentally. And right now we're sort of like infants fumbling around with this notion of AI and machine learning and big data. And we're thinking about it as a capability, but very, very soon it's going to be a solution to problems that we never could solve. Like, hear me out. I think for the longest time, software required really proficient users to get the value out of it. My old product when I worked at Intuit, Quicken, a brilliant user interface, very accessible for anyone who knows how to write a check. They could all of a sudden use this personal financial management software without having to know arcane accounting terms.
But Quicken changed everything for small businesses, right?
Yeah, QuickBooks, or small business accounting. If
QuickBooks, Quicken, I mean, for individuals and for small businesses, a breakthrough, gigantic.
But to get the value out of it, you had to get the data in, and it was initially very manual. And then we had online banking, and that made it a little easier. But you had to know to run reports, asking the right questions. If you were using Quicken, you had to set up a budget and a savings goal, and then categorize and recategorize to suit your buying patterns and where your discretionary income spend goes. All this work to ultimately get value. Salesforce is the same way in business software, right? Where you got to pound your reps to make sure they put the notes in there, and then you got to be a proficient user, and you even hire sales ops to
I can't believe how shitty the app looks. It looks like a 1999 Windows app still.
But God bless it. I mean, it's really powerful, really important.
Absolutely.
They're not going anywhere. But here's where I think software and tech go, software and hardware. Eventually, we will stop talking about AI as if it was the end goal, and we will use it, and it'll be, commodity set of tools towards actually solving the problems for the users. Kind of Google Photos is maybe my favorite example of it. Like for the longest time, there were consumer categories and then professional categories of photo management. And you had to tag your photos and delete the ones you didn't like and group them. And then if you wanted to do anything interesting, like make an album, it was all lots and lots of effort and manual. And they just, poured their machine vision, AI, search capabilities into this thing. And it's a game changer, right? You go there, all of us, with a minimum of effort, like name this picture of this person's face, and all of a sudden it knows who your son is, your daughter, your wife. Hell, the other day it said, would you like to see a movie we made of your dog? I never once labeled my dog or even told them I had a dog, but the software started to notice this same white dog all the time.
And what's the dog's name, Brian?
Maggie. And started to and offered this thing up. And that is what business software will start to do. That's where our hardware products will do. That's where I think IoT goes. It's the end of the default setting for one, right? This notion that 80% of people just leave the default setting and never dig into the advanced settings because it's too scary in there to try and set up these thresholds and alerts and schedules. Eventually it won't do any of that. It'll learn your habits. It'll make suggestions. It'll see how you react, and then it'll go do more of that. Nest is sort of an early example of that in a way. Don't program your thermostat, but there's so much more to go in every category of life, whether it's our automobiles or our home or our business software or, our smartphones and our clothing. Everything, I think, will have an intelligence layer to it that is adding real value.
Yeah. And the interesting thing I think about what you're saying, and you are absolutely on the forefront of it, is we're in a world where we're going from software that we do stuff for to get stuff from,
right,
to software that does stuff for us.
Right.
Full stop.
Right. That and you buy it because the promise is it'll fix these problems for you. This is what it does.
So one of the companies,
not the fact that it has AI in it.
Right. One of the companies I'm involved with, and their founder, Adam Honan, God bless him, was an early guest on Legends and Losers. They are a mobile CRM that is exactly that. It is as close to Tinder as possible in terms of data entry or any of that shit. And it tells you what to do. It says, follow up with this guy and call this gal and do and so forth. And then you and I are involved in the company together. We probably don't want to talk very much about it, but the thing that blows me away about Randy's company, and when he first came to talk to me about it, I remember sitting there and he's, I don't know, a quarter of the way through the pitch and the light bulb goes on in my head. It was like, oh, so there's going to be this new layer that sits on top of all this shit that we have had to sift through and hunt through.
Wrestle with, and yeah.
Yeah. And one day we're going to, one way or another, be able to just ask, hey, do I have any more vacation time? And it's going to say, yeah, you got 3 more days, or, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We're going to Alexify the enterprise in one way or another over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And eventually we'll figure out what we want to really use Alexa for.
Well, and you and I were talking about this a little bit after our surf session. So you have these things in your house, right? You have a bunch of them. Is that right?
Yeah, we have 2. We haven't gone overboard. There's folks right now in the early adopter phase wiring up everything just because you can.
Yeah.
But I think we will get to the point where it becomes magical. Like no one buys VHS or VCRs anymore, right? The DVR became the thing. It was just so much easier. And eventually that notion will go away, right? Because, do you really still have to tell it what you like and delete when you're running out of space and all this effort? Eventually all these products get to the point where they just do the work for you and deliver the delightful high value experience. At least that's a hope.
And so how far away are we, Brian, from an Alexa-like device that sits in our office and we say, Jimmy, give me my fucking sales reports. or Jimmy, how many new people did we onboard, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I question the notion of whether or not you'd even have to ask for it. It would sort of,
Jimmy would just start telling you.
Well, it would learn that, hey, you're way behind plan. Like maybe this needs to be a notification that goes to this person early, or it knows it's 3 days left to the end of the quarter. It's time to proactively give you a glimpse of how you might actually wind up.
I mean, Spiro does that. It says, hey, if you're going to meet your numbers, you got to do these things. I mean, get on it. And the funny thing, or the fun thing about Spiro is Adam and the team hired, I know I want to say she's a she, a comedy writer who'd been at SNL and done all this other fun stuff. And the product has personas. So it can be your quote unquote Jewish grandmother. It can be your, sexy boyfriend. It can be whatever it has all these. And last year we did a you're not supposed to say fucking Christmas anymore, a holiday promotion where we did a rip off of Bad Santa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what the guys called it. But you could essentially have, drunk Santa, bad Santa telling you to like call your prospects and shit. And so not only would it do all this stuff, you could have it do it in whatever persona you want it to.
Right. But the answer to your other question of sort of like when is, it's a while. We have a long way to go, and it's not because the algorithms aren't great. There's more progress to be made, but it's really the data. And this is maybe or the lack of data, and specifically data that has been labeled and closed loop training opportunities for the algorithms to realize, what is a good outcome, a bad outcome, a proper interpretation of a photo or of a customer that's going to buy versus one that's not going to buy. And the challenge is you need vast quantities of data, and more data is always better. So I think there's a big question in this new realm of intelligent enterprise or even just, AI assistance is, wow, is this an example where the incumbents are the ones who win because they have all the data, whether it's Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, on the consumer side, or Oracle, but certainly Salesforce, Workday, et cetera. And the hope, at least on the enterprise side, is that, they're targeting horizontal generic problems. They're not going to be the best at going really, really, really deep into a vertical that might require you to get real messy when it comes to custom integrations to data sets and do extra effort to get access to unique data sets. They're used to their customers just bringing their data to them, right? Not going out and having a data acquisition strategy, which is, I think, is the opportunity for startups.
So data, non-traditional data acquisition, cleansing and cleaning and parsing
and a new
sorting.
agreement with your customers, which says, the early days of cloud, the agreement had to be, I know you're nervous. I'm taking your data and putting it on my servers in the cloud somewhere, wherever the hell that is. I will protect it. I will make sure that no one else sees it. Trust me, it's yours. I'm just watching it over it. Well, the new value proposition has to be, if you let me see some of your data, and I'll respect the privacy. I'm not going to go try and, sell your customer to your competitor, but I need to see some data to make these algorithms smarter for everyone, for your benefit and the benefit of all customers. Are you willing to do that? And that's a very different proposition. And you got to start that intentionally up front.
Isn't that essentially the proposition of these 23andMe and these companies? Because I look at it and my friends do this and they go, oh, I found out I'm, 1/18th, whatever the fuck, from whatever fuck place. And isn't that fun? And And I go, oh yeah, that might be fun. But what they don't understand is the licensing agreement with these fucking people, if I understand it correctly, is you now have my data for exactly the reason you just described.
Yeah, I think about that one a little different though, only because the feedback loop.
Yeah.
Like me just saying that, you could see, what my genes say, about my ancestry and, whether I could taste cilantro and it's soapy or good or, all that stuff. I don't think there's a feedback loop on their ability to predict, am I going to, die of this cancer or that heart disease? Like they take them a while to know, oh yeah, well, he actually did. And so, our predictive capability on that gene is really, should be bumped up a little bit. Whereas in the business and consumer software realms I'm talking about, there are these closed loops of feedback to know, okay, I forecasted that customer was going to buy from you this quarter. Did they? How much? How much does that influence the algorithm going forward? Kind of the way Google Photos asks you, do you like this little album I made for you? Did I get the facial recognition right? When I labeled, this album as your kids, and then your subtle interactions train the thing. Yeah. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe somewhere in 23andMe there is a feedback loop like that, but I'm really thinking about these opportunities to get a big corpus of data and then create a closed loop that makes the algorithm smarter and creates a data-driven network effect.
Are you also looking for, if you roll the clock back, maybe not quite 15 years ago, but there was a lot of talk about discovery.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy Paul Martino started a company called Aggregate Knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be for shopping. It was if you like this, you'll like that for the universe, right? And
Right.
so that notion of discovery and what I know in big data is there seem to be a lot of companies that are looking for not necessarily sequential data processing, right? They're looking for non sequitur connections in data that human beings might not see because they
Mm-hmm.
can just process so much more. Or maybe said in a simple way, we had Tina Seelig on, a Stanford professor, and she was saying that the problem with education was, and I'm paraphrasing, was we teach kids to do math, what's 2 times 2, as opposed to saying, how do you get to 4?
Mm-hmm.
And her
Right.
argument
Interesting. Yeah.
was, in the world, the question is more often, how do you get to 4? Not 2 times 2. And there's a lot of answers for how do you get to 4, and there's one answer for 2 times 2, and that sort of fucks people up in the education system. These are my words, so I may not be getting her.
Oh, they're not hers.
She's like, never talking to that asshole again. But that's kind of how I connected the dot. And so I guess my point is, do you see a world where this intelligence is also looking for not necessarily the answers that you and I as human beings would be looking for? So, one of the other things Tina and I talked about was cancer research. Is it possible we're asking the wrong questions and that somehow there are patterns in data around cancer that we haven't been able to see?
And I'm glad you pivoted in that direction, because the notion of I'm going to help suggest, better TV shows or movies or, things to buy, like, frankly, there have been lots of companies doing stuff like that for a long time. And I don't know that I don't find that a particularly interesting problem to solve anymore. But realms like you're talking about around, biotech and other, real problems, that is absolutely what deep learning and these enormous data sets can enable. Now, in the realm of biology, my colleague Brian Roberts would tell you there's so much we don't know about human biology that the data is not going to be this magical panacea. But there's lots of realms where, things are known and unknown patterns can be found that then are relevant, whether, machine maintenance, industrial processes, security is a key one. You think about, cybersecurity, for sure. There's like so many different threat vectors every single day.
That's crazy, right?
And, you now need AI to triage and tell a cybersecurity expert, or person on a team what they should pay attention to. But physical security gets even, more trippy, that how blind we fly today to be able to decipher patterns and data on social media, across the web, all this stuff, and be able to figure out what is worth human intelligence paying attention to. We've got a big opportunity and a burning need there.
And you guys, and Roberts talked about this when he was on Legends and Losers. You like big, hairy problems that a lot of other people run from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard and it takes way longer. These companies tend not to get hot quickly.
Yeah.
But the big problems are the fun ones. and the ones worth, a good solid 10 to 12 years of your life trying to, help a team solve.
So another guest we had on not that long ago was Brian McCullough, the guy who does the Internet History podcast. And I don't know if you've checked it out yet.
I didn't hit that one yet, but I will.
Oh, you guys should be on it, actually. I think he's doing a really great job because he's trying to capture recent history while it's recent.
Right.
And it's a very cool idea. But anyway, one of the things he said was, and he sort of prefaced it by saying, look, I know this is a dub, but it's still a big smack in the head, which is what powers the internet is advertising. And so, when's the power of technology gonna be felt in big areas outside of media consumption and creation and advertising.
Right. Right. Well, there's, we're our eyes are just being open to the fact that there's still really important problems to be solved there around the whole fake news thing.
Well, yeah,
And
no shit.
so and the way we need to think about, are we creating problems with this AI that is so perfectly tuned to get you to click and respond and reshare content that maybe is creating more insular points of view, et cetera. So, I mean, there's so much more to be done, and lots of worthy problems to go after.
Yeah.
But I think we're at a really interesting inflection point, this whole notion of intelligence weaved into everyday life.
Well, and the thing that I love about it is Randy's company that you and I are on together, this notion of apps that do shit for you as opposed to you have to do shit for apps.
Yeah.
That's a big change.
That's right. I mean, the category of business intelligence, I sort of poke fun at, saying the problem with business intelligence as a category is it requires intelligent business people, and there's not enough of them. Facetiously, I say that because it shouldn't require
You're
that
not
much.
Directing that at me completely, are you? I mean, at least partially, I'm sure.
Well, I'm here in your studio. But we shouldn't have to work that hard. It shouldn't require us to be, SQL Boolean query experts to get value out of this technology.
Please, Lord. Now, if we could sort of pause on that stuff for a second, Brian, take me a little bit back in your life. I mean, you sit at one of the premier venture firms, Venrock, and you've been there for 20-something years, and a very special relationship with Roberts, and I'm sure other folks there that I don't know. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, let's see. I didn't know I wanted to be a VC when I was a child. I thought I wanted to be.
So you weren't asking your mom at 5 for like a VC Halloween costume or something?
No, I think, maybe kids here in Palo Alto know what that is.
Mommy, can I get some khaki pants and a polo shirt and,
right.
and a lot of fucking pleats?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And maybe some New Balance shoes.
Yeah. No, I grew up Long Island, New York, thinking I would be a doctor because I like science, and then fortunately, I had the advice to go follow a doctor and see what a doctor actually does, and I realized, I don't really love sick people and hospitals. I probably shouldn't go be a doctor, and so came out, and it's. In the late 80s, there weren't that many business opportunities that didn't force you to start at the very, very bottom of the ladder. Consulting was an interesting one because you'd be at the bottom of the consulting firm, but you'd get exposure to senior executives and big picture strategy problems. So I did that. I probably wouldn't recommend people do that anymore because
really.
I just think
remind me where you went.
I went to a firm called Monitor Company.
Yeah, I remember Monitor.
Yeah, which is now part of Deloitte.
Yeah.
And I think firms like McKinsey and Bain and BCG and Deloitte, I mean, they're great, but boy, if I had a kid coming out of, my son or daughter graduating college right now, and they wanted to be part of the innovation that's going on in the world, I would tell them to join a big, thriving platform company that still has plenty of juice left and plenty of growth.
Like a Google or a Facebook or something, or a Salesforce.
Yeah. Well, ideally, if you could find the private equivalent, or you could get to one of those companies
earlier than the big.
But even if you got there, a year or two or three after the IPO, frankly, those companies are doing so much interesting work.
Yeah.
Sure, any one of them would be great now.
Yeah.
But there's just so much opportunity, and they're dying for smart, intelligent individual contributors that I think you have a world of opportunity. The way the world has changed is it really, the business world now is way more friendly towards youth, right? Everyone wants to be in the mind of the millennial. And,
has it actually flipped? Is it to quote Ali G, is it racialist against
age
people
bias?
of a certain age? Yeah.
I sure think so. I think there's lots of evidence that happens in tech. So, that's a change in the world that favors the young, and the young should recognize it and jump right in with both feet if they're prone to that direction, right? Like, not everyone needs to be in technology or life science, but if you have any interest, and frankly, so many of the companies that are being formed aren't really tech companies. They just leverage tech to do things
Right.
like, disrupt the men's grooming category,
Yeah.
or disrupt the hotel industry or the taxi industry, et cetera. Like, so anyway,
As opposed to deep tech.
yeah. So I think it's an unbelievable time to be early in a career. My first foray into tech was at Intuit, managing the Quicken product family back when we shipped it on.
How is that your first fucking job in tech? I mean, that's an incredible job, particularly at the time you got it when.
Well, I entered as an associate product manager, and then you do the annual cycle enough, and you get more responsibility. They were a forward-thinking company in that they wanted people with an affinity for a research-driven approach
Mm-hmm.
to understanding consumer needs, rather than you had to be able to code really well. But I think now product managers almost everywhere have coding capability, and so that's a change in the tech landscape.
Yeah.
And so, if I were to give that advice, it'd be, boy, you better learn to code. It doesn't mean you have to be a professional coder, but having that understanding and ability to speak the language is very, very important.
So math, science, coding, get on it.
Statistics. Absolutely. But, front of house skills still matter. Communicating, writing,
those of us who can't do long division aren't doomed. Is that what you're saying?
No, there's still plenty of room in the world. I'm
curious, Brian, did you have any interaction at all with the legendary Bill Campbell when you were at Intuit?
Somewhat. He was less deep in the weeds of the product than Scott Cook.
Yeah.
Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, really loved that product and loved to spend time with the product team.
And he was deep for a very way longer than a lot of founders are, if I remember right. Is that right?
Yeah. But I think he took himself out of the operational, set quarterly goals, managing executive staff. And that's where Bill Campbell spent most of his time and was legendarily good at.
They became incredible partners, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I still can't believe he's gone.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So speaking of the coach, who were your mentors along the way?
I've had the good fortune of having mentors at each of my jobs. I now look at my partners at Venrock as mentors.
Yeah.
I think you can box yourself into thinking a mentor has to be someone at least 10 years older who's, achieved a certain level of success and, accolades, and, is so high up on the pyramid that it's undeniable that they're, above you and have something to teach. And you learn from everybody, but my peers, whether it's Brian or David or Nick or Camille, like I find that in a team environment such as we have, I learn from every one of them almost every day.
Yeah. And are you and Brian Roberts the two longest tenured?
No, we have an individual, Tony Evnen, who's been there far longer. He's not as active in the most recent funds, but he still manages a very vibrant portfolio of companies. So, venture, it's
a long business.
There are long cycles, and so it's one career where it never gets old or boring. The markets you're investing in change. The variety of companies you come into exposure with is so great that it doesn't feel like you get stale. It's not like being in one company for 10 years,
right,
hacking away at one problem.
Yeah.
Different problems, different people, different companies, tech trends constantly moving, having to be seeing the next tech trend. So, 20 years have gone by in the blink of an eye.
And what's it like to have been in business with, a couple of folks for 20 years? Because partnerships are hard, right? At least that's what everybody tells us.
I think if they're the right people, it's absolutely wonderful. It's fantastic. There's a degree of trust and a shorthand you develop that make it fantastic.
And how do you and Roberts, by way of example, I mean, you must have a little dust up, or there must be things he does.
By the way, he's going to fucking hate this topic.
Why is he going to hate it?
I don't know. It's too squishy.
Too squishy? Yeah, what you guys have done great on the squishy.
Culture is something we think a lot about, and it's a culture based on trust and honesty and striving for truth and striving for excellence. And if you bring extreme candor to the table and you're not trying to sell or position or defend your ego, then you fit into our culture. It's interesting. Venture capitalists get the there's a perception that we're very, very arrogant and think we know it all. And I think if you're self-aware, you realize we don't know shit. We get it wrong way more than we get it right. And it's the ability to help solve problems. And hopefully when you get it right, occasionally it's right in a big way. But man, the universe will show you day in, day out, all the things you missed or got wrong. And then it's all about realize that and help fix, solve, don't make the same mistake twice, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's why candor and trust and an open mind and not defending your turf or your ego is so important to the way we think about it.
I think it's very admirable what you guys have been able to do. It's tough. And particularly in a business that is, I don't know, maybe all businesses are ego driven, but when one of you has a big outcome or when one of you gets celebrated in the press, as does happen. And
well, it's nice of you to say, but I got to tell you that the internal mindset is we suck and we got to do better today. Honestly, it's you're never being satisfied, never resting on your laurels, never thinking you got.
So even when one of you guys is in some magazine or in,
magazine, worthless. You get no accolades for that. I thought you were going to say even when you have a big win. And
well, yeah, of course, because normally the magazines come after the wins, right?
But honestly, it's like 5 minutes of celebration, and then like I got to go back and work on these 10 problems. And frankly, the celebrating is really something the companies do. The best part of the job is being with the teams that you support, and really it's all about celebrating their success and hopefully taking some pride that you were a part of it and made one or two contributions along the way that made a difference. And, these are long, long journeys most of the time. It's generally at least a 10-year overnight success story. And those relationships are incredible. And sometimes you build the strongest relationships with the failures. Not always. Sometimes failure ends ugly. But when failure ends in very strong relationships and mutual respect, there's a good chance you'll work together again and hopefully go on to take those learnings and succeed the next time. So that's the best part of the job.
And that is something that is fairly unique about Silicon Valley, right? That you can work with somebody on a failure and maybe even have a prickly relationship for part of that time and very well work with them again on another opportunity and have a success.
Right. You were talking about Bill Campbell, and a lot of the early Intuit folks that he brought over were from Go and his company there. Learning from your mistakes is crucial.
I remember that old expression, there's some people that have 15 years of experience and there's some people that have 1 year of experience 15 times.
Right.
So how do you make sure that you're always learning, that you have that, what in martial arts is called the beginner's mind or the white belt, white belt's mind.
Or people call the growth mindset, that I could always be better. I could always, learn something new. I'm not fixed in my skills or even my interests. I guess the real question is, how do you accelerate the learning? And, for me, it's a combination of, voracious reading, trying to learn from others without having to go through the pain yourself, having, some larger framework to pour all this content into and run it up against. I think you have created a beautiful framework around this notion of category design. I hope I'm not overly flattering you.
Feel free.
Feel free. But I think having these,
it's only my life's work.
But I think it is important to pick your frameworks, make sure they're ones that apply to what you do and they're high enough quality and you've been discerning, and then see where they match and where they don't, and ride them as they serve you, and move on to broaden your horizons and your frameworks of the way a market or a discipline works. Because, it's all on the job now, right? Like we don't get the opportunity to go back to high school and college and graduate school and get fed this. You have to learn by doing, and hopefully you work with great people, you learn ways, you test and see the results, and then test something new. I mean, that's almost the same institutional learning that successful companies employ, which is lots of small iterative tests, being very perceptive about what the results are turning out to be, and then, keep going, keep working your way towards truth.
Mm-hmm. And there's something I've been thinking about, my dear friend and mentor, Bix Bixon. He positions himself and his firm as future hackers. And he said what future hackers do is they stand in the future and they pull the present to them. And one of the things, and I always ask him this, and I'm going to see him soon, and I'm going to ask him this again, is when you and I, for the most part, I'll speak for myself, when I'm presented with a new thing of any kind, of new business idea or a new, Bluetooth speaker for my thing, whatever it is, a new thing, what I naturally do is if you allow me, I hack the past. That is to say, I look at this new thing, this new Bluetooth speaker, and I look to my past and I go, I've had bad experiences with Bluetooth speakers in the past. Fuck it, I don't want this Bluetooth speaker. That's what I do. As opposed to hack the future and say, wow, if this Bluetooth speaker was awesome, how awesome could my life be? And maybe I don't even know what an awesome Bluetooth speaker would be. And that's hacking the future, if you will, in a very simplistic example. And so,
in a way, isn't that your notion of category design? Different, not better?
Well, absolutely. And category design is the ability to imagine a future that doesn't exist. And then if that future did exist, what would then be possible?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Like that Bluetooth speaker, like it's not just about better pairing and volume control. It's like, what if I could talk to it and it would talk back and access the internet and answer questions? And holy cow, now we've got Alexa, and what is Sonos over there thinking? Well, we make Bluetooth speakers. Shoot. Yeah. What just happened?
You guys all of a sudden went from geniuses to retarded. That's what happens. Those are Frodos, right? In action.
Yep.
And so I guess the question I'm trying to lead up to is, you're in a business where you have to hack the future to write the check.
Well, honestly, the way we view it is we have to appreciate the entrepreneurs that are hacking the future, recognize when a vision of the future is compelling to us, to them, maybe not to the rest of the world, and then go on the journey with them to hopefully get the rest of the world to agree in a couple of years. So yeah. I don't think we take no credit, deserve no credit for being the ones who hack the future. It's more,
but you have to be able to see what the entrepreneur is seeing at some level. And then you have to believe that this entrepreneur can make that thing a reality, right?
Sure.
And so I guess my question is, how do you try to look forward to see the future that the entrepreneur wants to design, as opposed to do what I just said, which is, oh, I've had bad experience with Bluetooth speakers. Fuck it, I'm not interested in Bluetooth speakers.
A lot of it is the description of the problem they're going to solve. we consume a lot of investment pitches. If there's one thing that, I don't buy a lot of ERP software, and I don't buy a lot of the technology that companies coming to pitch us sell, but we buy pitches, right? In a way. And some of the most compelling pitches, they've sold me by the time they finish describing the problem they're solving. They get you so worked up on the problem statement. They're like, okay, and you solved this? I don't even care how. I'm already like, I'm yours. And so it's a clarity in the articulation of the problem you're solving and why it matters. And then you can get to the point of and how we're going to do it and who's the great team behind it. That's why team is so critically important, but it's almost more relevant to hear about the team at the end after I know the problem you're solving, because then you know what to really listen for as far as relevance to that problem. But that's the essence. I think that's the from too, is what is this problem that the world either really knew they had, but there's been no solution whatsoever, or didn't even know they have, and now they're going to be convinced they have it.
I rarely want to kiss a man. I want to kiss you on the cheek, for the record, but and the reason I say that is so much of our industry is about the technology, is about the carboningulator, right? We fall in love with the solution, not the problem. And I believe the biggest problem in business today is too many solutions without a problem.
Yeah, that's why back when I was telling you about how excited I am about AI and machine learning and big data, what's not exciting is big data for healthcare or AI for customer service. What's interesting is the articulation of the problem that will solve. What's wrong with the way things are done today, and what is this new solution to this existing problem or this brand new problem? That's much more exciting than the how is the what.
Yeah.
You got to get the how right, but first get the what right.
And how often do you have an entrepreneur who rolls on into Venrock that is presenting you with a problem that you guys haven't really thought that much about, or you go, holy shit, I didn't even know?
Well, quite often, really. That doesn't necessarily get you all the way to the answer, but we're, there's just so many different domains on particularly on the tech side, where now tech is disrupting every different industry from every different direction. So yeah, no, we get presented a lot of problems. They're not always articulated at a degree of specificity and clarity that is truly compelling. But I'd say our curious minds are being presented with stuff we haven't thought of every day. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's what's fun. That's why 20 years later, it feels like
it's a new job every day.
Really is.
And how many entrepreneurs would you meet with in a typical month that you hadn't met with before? Net new things that are rolling into you.
Oh, I don't know. Call it 20-ish,
Wow.
20, 30, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but 200 plus a year?
Probably. That's a good number. I'd say on an average working day, you have at least one meeting with a new entrepreneur. There'd be some days you're backed up 5 or 6 or 7. There's some days you're spending all your time with your existing portfolio, which, is really the truly fun part. And you're solving new problems with them. But yeah, it's a lot of exposure, which is hard for an introvert, frankly.
So tell me about that.
Oh, just it's if I'm really honest with myself, I think meeting new people is fascinating and fun and interesting, but ultimately tiring for me, as opposed to the classic definition of the extrovert who takes renews their energy by constantly meeting new people. I find that when I'm meeting with someone, it requires a lot of attention and focus and high level of engagement, and hopefully do it in an artful way that creates a valuable conversation, not a threatening one or a challenging one that's going to elicit defensiveness. So, that's ultimately fairly exhausting, which tells me, that I feel that way, I'm probably an introvert, but we're all a blend, right? Introvert doesn't mean you're a monk, living in silence and you can't talk. Um, but I think there's a real difference in personality types, and both types can be successful for sure in
Yeah.
business, in venture. It doesn't matter.
It's
You're an
interesting.
extrovert.
Yes, but here's the thing. I have not had an introvert experience in getting to know you, because obviously we haven't known each other for very long. And so I get a more introverted than extroverted vibe from you, but I don't have an experience of a classic introvert.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a misperception. I think that word is very tainted in our
Yes.
culture. Very tainted. People immediately want to go to, weird places with, oh man, you like lack any social skills. It's almost like if you ever order a meal without meat in it, and people want to immediately say, oh my God, are you vegetarian? Like, really? Like, oh gosh. So I think a lot of introverts, either a lot of people wouldn't be identified as introverts that actually are, and I think there's a danger in believing that introverts don't have as much value to add in a business setting or a social setting.
I couldn't agree more. Interestingly, I had a very similar dialogue with my dear friend, legendary writer Dushka Zapata about this. She's an introvert too. And I'm always inviting her to come down with her boyfriend and spend a weekend here. And, what she's explained to me is I love the idea of that. And the thought of doing it terrifies the shit out of me. So it's probably never going to happen. The flip side of it, though, and I never understood this until she explained exactly what you just explained, is I am an extrovert who, in a social setting where I don't know people, I'm going to be very introverted. I am not the life of the party. I am not likely going to know everybody when I leave.
Right.
Because I can't fucking make small talk.
Right, but if you can find a handful of people or even one person to sit down and like shoot the breeze or solve the world's problems for 2 hours, that's probably more me too. That would be a great party for me.
Yeah, and things we can connect on. One of the things I love about living in Santa Cruz, as opposed to other places I've lived, is people in when you go to a party in Santa Cruz, first of all, almost nobody will ask you what you do. And if they do, It's going to be much, much later in the conversation if they ever get there. And the likelihood we find things to connect on is pretty high because people surf and they sail and they scuba dive and they CrossFit and they mountain bike and they do, we're all here for very similar.
Yeah.
So Santa Cruz is like an ethos. And so, at a party, people are more apt to ask, what have you been up to? Right.
Right.
Things along those lines. But like, I just recently got invited to a very big ding dong conference. And they didn't invite me to speak at it, but it's an expensive conference and this and that. And the guy said, well, free ticket and we'll put you on a panel and we'll make it worth your time. And I had to write this email in a very thoughtful way because I didn't want to be insulting. But I tried to explain, first of all, I'm retired, but more importantly, I know this sounds crazy because if you experience my personality, this is at least what people tell me, they would never get that being in that kind of social situation is like a hockey puck to the balls.
Right. Totally.
Because of that whole small talk. And I never understood it. It's like I score 10 on the extrovert scale. So like, why do I behave this way in these environments? I never understood it until later in my life. It's an interesting dichotomy. And so I don't know how many extroverts have this same thing, but it sounds like there's a fair number of introverts who are like you, who are social
Absolutely.
and engaging and all that. And so I don't know, maybe there's a lot of extroverts who, don't want to talk about the fucking weather either.
And they freak introverts out. We're like, oh man, that's why I don't go to parties. Totally.
So Brian, what are you most excited about the future?
I think it is this notion of intelligence everywhere, in our hardware, in our software, in our clothing, in our vehicles, in our food produced intelligently. I don't want necessarily chips in my tomatoes, unless it's unless it's salsa with tortilla chips. But I think that's the big change. That's what excites me about the world, and hopefully we'll apply it to some really big problems, like resource consumption and global warming and a whole bunch of things that really matter.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else before we kick out of this wave?
I think it's time to kick out. Let's go get another one.
Yeah, let's go get another session. All right, Brian, thank you so much. It's been awesome. And you're an incredibly inspiring guy. And I love spending time with you, whether it's in the water or bullshitting about business and life.
Thank you, Chris. I feel the same way. It's been a pleasure.
Whew. Brian Ascher. Yeah, boy, do we have a ton of fun. I don't know what I did in a former life to get to have the kind of magical day we had together, hanging out, surfing, eating burritos, podcasting, and having a great time. So thank you so much again, Brian. Thanks for having me on Running Through Walls. And if you loved this episode as much as I did, why don't you share it on social media right now? Now, before we wrap the show, I'd like to do a couple shout outs to Jeffrey Ross. Jeffrey, thank you. Jeffrey's been pretty vocal in the digital world about his enthusiasm for Play Bigger and Legends and Losers. And he wrote an Amazon review where he gave us 5 out of 5 stars. And he said that Play Bigger, the book I co-authored, if you're a regular listener, you well know, he said, quote, best actionable business book since Crossing the Chasm. And then later on in his Amazon review of Play Bigger, he also mentions Legends and Losers, and he says, quote, best business podcast going today. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful shout outs and review. Also want to shout out to everybody who's been sharing the Doug Merritt episode on social media. It's interesting. Doug Merritt is the CEO of Splunk, a $11 or $12 billion publicly traded technology company. And when we hit end on the recording of that episode, I thought, you know what? Doug really set a new standard for authenticity and openness and realness, particularly for public company CEOs. We live in a world where if you're the CEO of a public company, you are pretty locked down by lawyers and handlers with what you can and can't say. And on that episode, let me see if I can find the number while I'm mentioning it. But Doug really opens up in a way that he takes you from what it was like being an engineer and a sales rep early in his career, all the way. It's episode 106 with Doug Merritt, all the way up to being the CEO of one of the most important enterprise technology companies in the world. And countless numbers of folks have shared that episode. So thank you so much. Also want to shout out to Ben Brennan for connecting with me. We had a super fun thread going there for a little while. And Alan Bannon for connecting on LinkedIn. Also want to say take my hat off. Thank you so much to Jordan Harbinger and everybody at the legendary podcast, The Art of Charm. If you haven't, if you're one of the people who maybe for some way have not heard of Jordan Harbinger and The Art of Charm, I would highly recommend you check it out. It's one of the top podcasts in the universe. And we had as good a dialogue about entrepreneurship and category design as I think I've ever had. And so if you want to check that out, my episode of Art of Charm is episode number 681. But more importantly, check out Jordan's show. It's fantastic. Also want to alert you, we have a new mini book coming out on personal category design. Essentially, I have heard so much bullshit about personal branding over the last 5 or 6 years that I finally couldn't take it anymore. Because the truth is, what makes people successful is when they do personal category design, not personal branding. So with help from our legendary producer, Matt Johnson from Pursuing Results, we have put together a new mini book on personal category design and why personal branding is complete BS. If you want an advanced draft copy from us right now, we'll send it to you. And if by chance you want to give us some feedback as we're preparing the final copy of the book, and it's really like a giant white paper. That's why we call it a mini book. But we're happy to share with you an advanced copy right now. And you can provide us feedback on it before we go to final print if you want to. And B, regardless of feedback or not, we will also send you the final version when it comes out a little bit later this year. Now, to get your copy of the draft mini book from us on personal category design, write a review on iTunes or wherever else you like to get your podcasts. Take a screenshot of that review, cut and paste it into an email, send that email to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com, and we will send you the draft of the book, a mini book, and then ultimately the final version of it. So screenshot of your review, blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. We would like to thank Running Through Walls, the legendary podcast from our good friends at Venrock Capital. Check it out wherever you get legendary podcasts, Running Through Walls. HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Why not pick up a copy for everyone in your company today? Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business at equitydirectory.co. NetSuite, #1 in cloud ERP. Check us out at netsuite.com. OneLifeFullyLive.org. Dream, plan, and live your best life. Check us out at onelifefullylive.org. Verve Coffee Roasters, the official coffee of Legends and Losers in Santa Cruz, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tokyo, and maybe some other places I missed, and always at vervecoffee.com. Speaking of coffee, the legendary Marketing Over Coffee podcast with our friends John Wall and Christopher Penn. Check them out. These are smart guys. And we're hoping to have, well, I'll shut up about that. Check out Marketing Over Coffee podcast. Category Design Advisors, working with leadership teams to design and dominate new categories at categorydesignadvisors.com. Outposition.com. Legendary Marketing and Category Design in Singapore, out with a dash, position.com. Positive Marketing, legendary marketing and category design in the UK. Check them out, Positive Marketing. PursuingResults.com, the producers of legendary podcasts, and this one too. Our good friends at InterviewValet.com. If you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on some podcasts today at InterviewValet.com. Brother James, BROTHA, James, motivational and inspirational music for your next corporate event. Check them out at brotherjames.com. Back from the Dead, the amazing book from the most legendary basketball icon, Bill Walton. Check it out. It's a fantastic read. And speaking of read, our friends at 1-800-CEO-READ.com, the amazing place to get your business books, 800-CEO-READ.com. Check them out. We would like to remind you that this oddcast is the whole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love you just a little bit more if you shared the shit out of it. We must remind you, all rights do remain disturbed, and we must warn you that Legends and Losers will make you better looking. The producers of this oddcast may have been producing like libations. Listen to Legends and Losers. Listen to You know, that reminds me, there was this time when I was a kid where there was, I'm going to interrupt the outro here. There was a time when I was a kid where they used to play records on the radio. And I will never forget listening to John Mellencamp, his song, Jack and Diane. And there's a line in the song where John sings, scratches his head and does his best James Dean. And the record scratched right there. And so what you heard was scratches his head and scratches his head and scratches his head. And this went on for quite a while. And all of a sudden you heard this, which was, of course, the needle going over the record and the song continuing. So for some reason, I was just, my needle got stuck there. Watch The Big Lebowski. Be nice to your sister. Never turn your back on the ocean. Don't forget that plastic bags are not children's toys. Support your local venture capitalist. Watch out for Putin. Thank you, Dandy Candy. I love you, Mom and Dad. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go out to former Chief Executive Officer of Volkswagen, Martin Winterkorn. Sorry, Marty, we just ran out of time for you. That's it. Thanks for investing your life with us. We look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.